Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the grand finals of Victory Road's World Cup of VGC. My name is Stefan. With me is Hayden, and we are here to bring you game number 4 of this incredible match. How are you feeling today, Hayden? How have you enjoyed the matches we've had so far?
Yeah, I am so excited to be able to cast these next few games. I was supposed to sort of sleep in a little bit. It's a bit early my time zone, and instead I just woke up at 6 a.m. and have been watching these things constantly. My face was glued to my screen. Every single set was so interesting from all of the players. You can see the preparation that everyone has put into this finals, and I'm so looking forward to seeing this next game and casting it with you.
Yeah, and of course, none of these matches would be possible without our incredible partners. Of course, everybody working hard behind the scenes at Victory Road, but also a big shout out to our 3 sponsors, Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafee, who are making this whole event possible. It's been an amazing 10-week-long event, a little bit longer if you count the off weeks. But really, just fantastic games all the way around, and this finals is showing us the best of the best. It's really cool, right? I love that we have the storyline of Canada versus Thailand, 2 teams that I think a lot of people identified as being very strong teams, but nobody would have expected this finals. Like, even going into top 8, you look at the top 8 bracket, no one is expecting this finals. Just such incredible storylines all the way through. And we have individual players, like in individual matches that look really cool as well. We can see those players here in front of us. A 2-1 lead at the minute for Thailand. But we're going into a crazy match number 4. 2 of the craziest, most creative players from both sides. I'm excited to see what Matt Tin and Chaiyawat can bring to us in game number 4.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to show a little bit more of the accomplishments from Matt and Chaiyawat as we get into that in a little bit. But before we do, just these first few matches are so important for both of these teams. We've seen that both of them are so capable at taking momentum and just running with it. And I think with Thailand being up a couple of games most recently, there's a lot of onus on Matt to be able to sort of pull this back. And both of these players, I think they'll have a lot in store for us here, but there's definitely a lot of pressure going into this match too, looking at these scores.
Yeah, I think looking at the matches that we've had so far, it's been really interesting. I think one of my favorite storylines from Team Canada is Kylan Van Severen. He and I are kind of kindred spirits in a way. I don't think I've actually ever spoken to him one-on-one, but we're both the Indianapolis champions from this year. But he is, of course, a senior. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that a lot of seniors will struggle with being matched up with a lot of Masters players. You know, the best seniors go on and become incredible Masters players, but there's always a bit of doubt where you're like, okay, how will they adapt to playing against like Masters players who have been playing the game for generally longer than they have? And he's done a fantastic job coming into this match. He was at 4-4, and getting a win to start off the grand finals is really sick. I love that we're seeing some representation from the senior side of things. I know some of the other teams that have done really well, like Brazil, also have high representation from high level seniors, and it's great to see that in this tournament.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful little shout out. I was so proud of Kylan getting that win. It was so incredibly well played and such a close set. I struggled a lot myself with my transition from seniors to masters way back in 2013 to 14. And it's really awesome to see a player go into this situation, learn as much as they can, and really get that win when it really matters for their team.
Yeah, and then continuing things on, we had Traiwichcha going up against Sableye, and of course Willie going up against Papon with 2 other incredible matches, leaving us where we are now. 2-1 for Thailand, a best of 7. Still a lot to play for, but this is a big pressure match, like you mentioned, Hayden. Chaiyawat can put Thailand into a match point position. Most of the time, regardless of what the remaining matches look like, if you're up 3-1, you're feeling pretty good. Matt Tidd on the other side has an opportunity to tie things up and keep everything open.
Yeah, absolutely. Resting on Matt Tidd's shoulders, we do know that he has a lot of accomplishments. There's the Milwaukee Regionals top 16, World Cup competitor last year. That experience really coming in handy this year with the way that this is a team sport and requires so much collaboration. And Matt Tidd himself has such a great record. Roanoke Regionals top 32 in 2019 and a North American Internationals top 64 in 2018. All very strong accomplishments. And of course, being in the finals with a strong record going into Canada trusts Matt with this match that is so important. And I think that means a lot as well.
Yeah, I do like how crazy Matt looks in his profile picture, because I feel like that accurately encapsulates the way he plays the game, or rather the way he builds his teams. He has a lot of really wild stuff, and he's one of those players that I think, especially in a team format, is incredibly scary to play against, because while he doesn't have the same level of accomplishments as we see on the right-hand side of our screen, which we'll get to in a second, I feel like he definitely could and should. I would not be surprised if, like, halfway through 2023, it's like, oh yeah, Matt Tidd won a regional. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. He's super flexible. He can play crazy stuff, and he can play pretty standard stuff. He's bringing a pretty standard team today. So, really, really hard player to prep for. You never really want to go too hard on counter teaming or predictions because he can do pretty much anything. And that's really what you want when you're going up against one of the best players from the opposing side.
Yeah, absolutely. Chaiyawat, we didn't have the chance to shout out all of the accomplishments, but just extraordinarily a veteran player, but phenomenal accolades. And coming into this set with a really interesting team, we see a Solgaleo and a Suicune. I believe we've seen this sort of a composition a long time back at EUIC versus a Calyrex, Ice, and Palkia team on Matt's side of the field.
Yeah, this is a really throwback match. This was the team. Chaiyawat's team was used by a bunch of the Italian crew that showed up to EUIC. Yuri, I know, got day 2, and I'm pretty sure Pato and Zenzero all got day 2 at this team. I'm not 100% sure, but they did all get CP at the very least. And then Palkia Cali Ice, which I think hit its apex of popularity, also right around the same time. There was a lot of Palkia Cali Ice in that tournament, so we're really just looking at a bit of a time capsule match here, looking at April of 2022 all over again.
It's one of the really interesting things about these team formats and these prepared matches that often you're jumping all over the place in terms of times for when you're grabbing teams from and what you're playing. And players really have to have a strong command, not just of the post-Worlds metagame, but of everything that led up to that, because that's all resources that players can draw from when they're building their teams. And so I'm really excited to jump way back into the past with you and cast this particular matchup.
Yeah. It's going to be a really, really fun one. Looking at this, I haven't really seen the Solgaleo Suicune team in a hot minute. I don't know who's favored here. I don't know which team is favored here. I'm just fascinated to see what we can get or what goes on the battlefield here between these two players. I'm sure it's going to be another fantastic match, as every match has been so far today. And it's gonna be happening right now. Let's get on into it.
So Solgaleo coming out right at the start next to its fellow Sun-restricted Groudon, setting up that Sun, facing down a Palkia and an Incineroar here. So some nice opportunity for Palkia to do a little bit of damage, maybe set Trick Room, but that Solgaleo, not affected by that Intimidate, going to be able to start putting on a lot of pressure against most of the Pokemon on Matt's side of the field.
Yeah, 3 out of the 4 restricteds on the field already. I do feel like this is a pretty standard lead here from Matt. Going to be trying to set up that Trick Room more than likely. Chaiyawat, though, has a couple of options here. You know, the Groudon, of course, always a threat, especially, like, Palkia. It could max, it could go for big damage here, but you don't really want to be doing that because, on the other side of the field, we've got 2 pretty bulky Pokemon and also the Sun taking away the main damage output of Palkia's Water-type moves. So probably going to be seeing a bit of a Trick Room opening here from Matt.
Yeah, Trick Room definitely a really strong option from Matt, and I think the question is just sort of what Chaiyawat can get out of this first turn. The Groudon getting that Intimidate a bit iffy, but then it also does still have a lot of strong damage, and then there's a lot that rests, I think, on what this Solgaleo's moveset is. If it's able to do good damage into these Pokemon, or if it's really relying on more of those Steel-type attacks, or maybe a little bit of Ground-type attacks into that Incineroar, that might it might matter quite a bit whether it has a good attack into this Palkia, as we see the switch coming out.
All right, the Incineroar comes on in. Chaiyawat looking like a bit of a flex there. 3 for 3 on Shinies. It's been impressive. But here we go. It's going to be a Dynamax here on that Solgaleo. Big red Suncat going large. Let's see what it's able to actually accomplish here. I feel like the interesting thing about this matchup, or one of the interesting things, is that while a lot of the Pokemon are kind of middling speed and wouldn't be the worst theoretically in Trick Room, there isn't really anything that functions particularly well in that Trick Room. So being able to get set up, maybe getting a Dynamax Calyrex Ice Rider is going to be what Matt Tidd is going to be trying to accomplish here. Max Quake already dishing out big damage to that Incineroar, but it does hang on.
Yeah, Incineroar being able to hang on is huge here. Also, the information that it's not that Shuka Berry, that's going to be really important. And we do see that Trick Room coming up. I think, as you mentioned, it's really the onus is on Matt to try to figure out what are the Pokemon I can leverage in Trick Room better than Chaiyawat, because Chaiyawat doesn't have a clear Trick Room sweeper. But it is tough because this Calyrex Ice that you would want to use for Trick Room, really not loving facing down that Solgaleo, and the Solgaleo is already getting those defensive boosts while putting out a lot of offensive pressure. It's one of the things these Steel-type restricteds are really scary about when they can Dynamax.
Something that is worth noting, with that Max Quake boost and now also the -1 coming in from the parting shot onto the Palkia, this is probably not going to be a big deal in this individual game, or at least in the next couple of turns, but the Palkia is carrying Flamethrower. That is a tech that has been around for a while. It makes you a lot more consistent against late-game stall Pokemon like Ferrothorn, but it might help against the Solgaleo. We have Sun on Chaiyawat's team, which is essentially going to give stab to that fire move. So that is a possible way to deal with the Solgaleo, which otherwise does have a pretty solid defensive matchup into a lot of Matt's team.
Absolutely. Seeing the parting shot come out into the Thunderous, not ideal if that is in fact the Defiant variant. If it's Prankster, then I think we're okay.
Good information right there for Matt. He finds out that he's not screwed. So it's going to be a Prankster Thunderous there. So that's also good to know.
Yeah, a really nice way to confirm that. Probably not a thing that Matt would have wanted to go for if he had known that that's what was going to be pivoting in, but getting that confirmation, super useful here. Also sort of explains why it's coming to this match. Defiant Thunderous didn't seem like it was in a great position here. Spatial Run coming out with that parting shot going to be okay, and we're seeing the Max Lightning perfectly timed, coming out right as the Amoonguss comes onto the field. It's not doing much damage, but what you really needed there was just setting this up so that this Solgaleo has a bunch of defensive pressure. The Palkia does have Flamethrower, but it's at -1 special attack, and the Solgaleo has a special defense boost. And this other way of managing it with the Amoonguss is no longer an option. You can't use Spore on it.
You can still use Spore on the Thunderous. Not sure how impactful that's going to be with the Thunderous still being able to move first with the Prankster ability. But I do feel like this is another bit of nice confirmation information coming in from Matt. This is probably a tell that the Solgaleo is an Assault Vest variant, because usually the Max Lightning, the Wild Charge, will be that sort of fourth move on the Solgaleo. It's hard to fit that in on something like a Weakness Policy Solgaleo. So he's probably going to be feeling a little bit happy that he's getting a lot of information here. But, this is setting up this Solgaleo to be very, very difficult to break, as you mentioned.
Switching out, not liking that potential Spore that it could take, going into this Groudon, no longer intimidated that Groudon is. Amoonguss is going to go for that Spore. It is going to be blocked by the electric terrain now, and Palkia is going to be able to get a Spatial Rend off. If it can get a critical hit, it's going to be doing some good damage, but otherwise that parting shot is really going to keep it from doing too much. That Groudon takes that incredibly well, and the Steel Spike coming out into that Amoonguss, doing a whole lot of damage, bringing that Amoonguss really low. It's going to be tough to get a lot of mileage out of this Amoonguss with how well Chaiyawat has been playing this position so far.
Well, the Berry is going to help out, as will the Regenerator ability, should it decide to switch out, which is going to put it moderately close to about 70-ish% by the looks of it. One of the nicest things about Amoonguss, you can just keep switching it out for that recovery, plus Porygon 2's there for recovery. Matt has a team that is very capable of playing a slow game here. The problem is, Trick Room is putting him on a little bit of a timer, and it's looking more and more like Matt might need to rely on setting a secondary Trick Room, which is a lot harder to set up for than that initial lead.
Yeah, definitely tough to have that gamble of the Trick Room. You go for it right away, and you are using up one of your turns to be moving first for a while. And there hasn't really been a turn where it feels like Matt benefits a lot from attacking first. And so it feels like that Trick Room isn't doing the mileage that it should be doing, and we're going to have to see if Matt can get a second Trick Room up and maybe use that mileage a little bit better. As you mentioned, this Amoonguss does have the ability to pivot out and keep getting some hit points. One thing very much to Matt's credit is that this Solgaleo has burned all of its Dynamax and not taken a single KO, but it is going to be tough to see where Matt can find that offense in return.
Something that's also worth noting is that with an Assault Vest, by restricted standards and without Dynamax, Solgaleo really doesn't dish out that much damage, you know? Oh, but actually, this is looking like it is in fact going to be Weakness Policy, running Weakness Policy as well as Wild Charge. That is a big reveal there. Getting a KO onto the Incineroar is big as well. And I was about to talk about how the Solgaleo might struggle to deal with a Dynamax Calyrex Ice Rider. I don't think that's really the case anymore, Hayden.
Yeah, being able to get that off is so incredible. And as you mentioned, having a moveset that maybe isn't conventionally associated with that Weakness Policy, and being able to set this all up, we're actually seeing the Trick Room coming out, reversing the dimensions, and now we've got a boosted Solgaleo. It's going to be moving first all the time, with a Calyrex and an Amoonguss in the back, with so much bulk on the Solgaleo with the defensive boost, with its attack boost too. It's going to be really tough for Matt to come back. That was a phenomenally played turn, a wonderful timing to reveal that Weakness Policy.
Yeah, really great time to reveal the Weakness Policy, getting rid of that last turn of Trick Room before it has a chance to happen. Does have me questioning whether or not the Solgaleo is running Protect, though, because if you're running Wild Charge and Trick Room, that doesn't leave that much space. We already know Sunsteel Strike's there, but we haven't seen that
Quake too.
Have we seen? Yeah, we have seen
Yeah,
Quake. So there's
so
no protect.
no
On that
protect.
Solgaleo. Big reveal there on that turn. Matt might be able to use that to his advantage, but it's going to be really, really tough to find any kind of advantage in this game. Chaiyawat's positioned his pieces so well.
Yeah, I think you said this really well. That the challenge is for Matt to figure out, okay, I know the Solgaleo can't protect itself. I know it does have that weakness policy, so I have to be really careful around it. How can I play around that to the best of my ability? We do see the big resource that Matt hasn't revealed yet, or hasn't used yet, is that Dynamax. And if this Calyrex is able to somehow survive a really powerful Steel-type attack from the Solgaleo, or if the targeting is different, maybe there's some way back into this game, but definitely a really tough... Oh, and we do see the Wild Charge coming out into the Palkia instead of targeting that Calyrex. We'll have to see what this Calyrex can do in return.
Reveal on the Wiki Berry here from the Palkia. That's going to be pretty nice. I feel like Solgaleo there doing a little bit of a favor to me, kind of illustrating my point. +2 Wild Charge on terrain still doesn't pick up that Palkia. So, you know, without the... If we can see the Solgaleo not get a boost up, I feel like Matt can deal with that pretty effectively, but here we see it surviving the Max Quake from the Cali Ice, so a big moment as well. Solgaleo is just not getting removed from play, but the Trick Room comes out. Precipice Blade's miss also helping out quite a lot there, and all of a sudden, Matt's in a much better position.
I should know better as a caster than to say that someone's on the back foot. Matt plays that turn phenomenally. Being able to call that the Calyrex wasn't going to be targeted down with that Sunsteel Strike, being able to get that Max Quake off, the Solgaleo has set itself up phenomenally well. It has defensive boosts and offensive boosts, but it still only has single target moves with the moveset that it's chosen. And so not being able to get that KO on Palkia, like you mentioned, that damage just lacking a little bit, and suddenly this Calyrex is in a great position to do so much. We're going to actually see the Solgaleo with all of its boosts. It just has to switch out.
Yeah, it's the only way to keep it alive at this point. The Solgaleo is a very, very important piece to deal with this Calyrex Ice Rider. If it can manage to be on the field out of Trick Room with no Dynamax, that's going to be able to deal with that pretty effectively. But the White Herb is going to offset that Intimidate, which means this Hailstorm is going to do absolutely gigantic damage into the Groudon. I don't really see a world where it survives, and down it goes.
Getting that Chilling Neigh boost too. This Incineroar switched in to lower the attack, and now this Calyrex is at the end of the turn with a boosted attack. This Palkia is also going to be able to do plenty of damage into this Incineroar, most likely, even with that -1 special attack. Just getting that chip off, being in a good position. Well, spoke too soon. Flamethrower coming out into that Incineroar. Not too important, though, because the really important factor here is this Calyrex Ice. Getting those attack boosts. Still has a turn of Dynamax. This Incineroar can't use Fake Out on it. Going to be just a wonderful positioning. Matt, we said that he would need to try to get more offense in the second Trick Room, and he very, very, very much did.
Part of me is wondering how much Chaiyawat's game plan was thrown out by was thrown off by the Palkia just staying in. Like, I feel like if you put the Palkia at a -2, you're kind of expecting it to switch out to try to reset those drops at some point, and Matt's just kind of sat there with it saying, I actually don't care. I'm here to set a second Trick Room and get a little bit of chip here and there, I guess. And Palkia does have a pretty massive special attack stat, so Hydro Pump, even with its drops, is still going to be doing a pretty effective amount of damage to the Incin. Thundy also going to take quite a lot of damage here from Spatial Rend, which does have a high crit rate as well.
Yeah, the Palkia especially, just like a nice Pokemon to have with the special attack drops because of that boosted crit rate of Spatial Rend, because it can just focus on Trick Room, because it can always get chip out and just leverage its bulk. We are going to see Incineroar needing to just pivot out as well, going into the Solgaleo, which is not going to be on the field much longer if I saw the targeting from Matt's side correctly. We're going to see that Max Quake come out, finish off that Pokemon, and that is the end of the Dynamax. But with 2 attack stage boosts on this Calyrex, going to be really tough to be able to handle it unless you've got something amazing that this Thundurus can pull out.
Yeah, the only out I'm seeing is, well, you do have Fake Out on the Incineroar, that's kind of helpful, and Thunder Wave for full paras. I think you're just going to have to get a lot of full paras here. Spatial Rend's going to go in. It should not KO based on the damage roll we saw earlier, but whoa, that's close. That looks like it's just going to be 2 Hail Chip turns away from dying, and Rising Voltage is shown off as well. Not really going to do too much there. Interesting move choice for the offensive move on the Thundurus, but now it's looking like there's just not enough time left for that Thundurus. This is just it's just going to go down to the Hail next turn. There's not really much Chaiyawat can do.
It's too bad that Rising Voltage came out just after the electric terrain had faded. I think that's a really interesting way to play into 2 Pokemon working together to try to use that Rising Voltage with the Max Lightning from the Solgaleo. I'm excited to maybe see that going forwards. But yes, with where we're at now with the Hail Chip, it feels like Matt has a lot of really strong options here. You mentioned that where there's a Thunder Wave, there's a way, and I think you're right. So we'll have to see how this endgame plays out. Palkia doesn't have super accurate moves to handle the Incineroar, but definitely Matt's done a really good job of showing I don't have to get all the momentum right away. I just have to time when Calyrex Ice comes in, and then I'll be in a great spot.
Yeah, there's the battle the battle forfeit there from Chaiyawat, 1-0 for Matt Tid. Chaiyawat did such a great job to get all the momentum in the earlier stages of the game, but I feel like revealing Trick Room, I don't know if that was the play, because if you're running Weakness Policy, if I see somebody proc a Weakness Policy, I'm assuming that Pokemon has Protect, and it just didn't help that much, because there was a second Trick Room set up immediately afterwards, and maybe the Precipice Blades miss mattered, but the Wiki Berry put that Palkia back up to like 110 HP. I don't think Precipice Blades kills there. So overall, I think things started off really, really well for Chaiyawat, and then a couple of turns where things just didn't quite go his way, and all of a sudden, Matt Tid takes game number 1.
Yeah, it's really tough when you're playing those games against Pokemon with items like Wiki Berry, where maybe like a lower damage roll plus the Precipice Blades would have finished off the Palkia. It's always so tough, and that Trick Room did almost win the game. Like, it almost just completely sealed it up for Chaiyawat. But with the way that things played out, now you have to figure out how to win this next game, with it revealed that the Solgaleo has no way to protect itself if it's not Dynamaxed. And even with those boosts, it wasn't able to close this first game. So it's definitely a tall order for Chaiyawat to figure out how to handle that going forwards. And yeah, Matt, as you said, just in a great position going into this next game with that win, with some really strong game plans going into it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We saw the power of Solgaleo, and I really feel like Solgaleo is Chaiyawat's way through this match. He just needs to make sure that it doesn't get taken down. I think one of the issues is going to be the reveal on Weakness Policy. Makes it so that the as of yet unrevealed Max Flare from the Palkia could be really, really good. You don't have to respect the potential Assault Vest. And of course, if the sun is set, that's going to do big damage.
Yeah, Palkia definitely a big threat going into this, but we're actually seeing a pretty big switch up from Chaiyawat. The Venusaur is coming out, and Palkia and Incineroar, just like before, the sort of standard tried and true, no reason to necessarily switch it up yet, but we're going to have to see if this Venusaur gives a reason why this isn't quite right. I think there was a very passive play from the start of the game from Matt before, and if you're able to set up a Vine Lash during that, maybe that's worth not having the Dynamax on the Solgaleo.
Yeah, Venusaur also, of course, threatening Sleep Powder. The reveal on the Wiki Berry is nice, because sometimes Palkia will carry safety goggles. It's not the most common thing in the world, but, knowing that you can actually just Sleep Powder that Palkia may be something that you don't want to risk if you haven't confirmed the item when you're at a 1-0 deficit. But Chaiyawat has a lot of options here. You can switch to the Groudon to make that Venusaur go Zoom. You can go for a Fake Out of the Sleep Powder. I don't know if I didn't actually catch which Incin was faster, though.
I'm not sure I did either. I think we might see it this turn. The Groudon coming in place of the Venusaur. Maybe hoping that the Venusaur drew some attention. Flare Blitz would have been an option. A Fake Out would have been an option. Instead, we're just seeing that pivot. But the Fake Out's actually coming into the other Incineroar from Matt's slot. So either the faster Fake Out or making a call that the other Incineroar wasn't going to be going for that Fake Out. And suddenly Trick Room's up on turn 1 without Chaiyawat having accomplished anything just yet.
Yeah, that was a bold play by Matt, not faking out the Venusaur, just calling either the Protect or the Switch. A lot of the time that is the safe play. You don't want to just click Sleep Powder necessarily because, it's pretty obvious that you could get faked out. But it's a good call there by Matt, setting up the Trick Room and getting a lot of momentum in this game number 2 already right off the bat.
Yeah, so much momentum. This Groudon is in position. It doesn't have an attack drop. It can do a lot of damage to these Pokemon, so there's definitely some options from Chaiyawat's side of the field. But with getting that Trick Room up right away, having that Incineroar able to parting shot out, having Palkia with no reduced offense until now, being able to start to maybe fire off some attacks is definitely really nice. But we'll have to see what Chaiyawat has in store. You have to imagine he knew the Trick Room was going to go up at some point. What's his plan for handling it?
Well, I guess we're about to find out. I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw Parting Shot on both sides here, which is quite nice. We confirmed that Matt's Incin is probably the faster one here. Could be Speed Tide, but, generally speaking, we're going to assume it's going to be the faster one. But that's really nice here because he gets to reposition second. He gets to bring in his Pokemon, basically knowing that the Solgaleo is going to be on that side of the field for Chaiyawat. We'll see what the option is, and it's going to be a Porygon too. It's a great adaptation. Access to that foul play is going to be a really nice way to take advantage of that potential weakness policy.
Definitely felt like Amoonguss wasn't doing the work that it wanted to do before, and so it's really interesting to see this attempt to try the Porygon 2 and see what it can do. It starts out by taking a Precipice Blades incredibly well. This Palkia also not taking very much damage at all, but just firing off a Spatial Rend into that Solgaleo slot, not going to be a whole lot of damage, but that's not really Palkia's role. Palkia doesn't have to do a lot of damage here. It has to survive, it has to set Trick Room, it has to get a little bit of damage on the right things at the right time.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one as well, though, because the Porygon 2, it can't just click Foul Play into the Solgaleo necessarily, because if it Dynamaxes, the Porygon's going to move first. The weakness policy is not going to be procced. Solgaleo's not going to take that much damage, and then you're going to be the one giving it the weakness policy. But that might just be the play, because the other side of things, if the Solgaleo doesn't have any spread options, it can't remove both sides of the field. So maybe the plan is to just click Foul Play into it twice.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see how this Porygon 2 manages that Solgaleo. There's that really weird double-edged sword of attack boosts on a Pokemon when it's facing down a Foul Play Pokemon, but also Matt needed to think about, do I want to activate that? I have to do it at a very controlled way at exactly the right time so that this doesn't steamroll through my team. We are going to see that Incineroar pivoting in, Palkia coming out for now and resetting those drops like it didn't do at all last game. And we're going to have to see what this Porygon 2 goes for, as it looks like we do see that Dynamax coming out on the Solgaleo. So Chaiyawat definitely banking on being able to weather the storm of Trick Room with this Solgaleo, and maybe try to get that boost at the right time to start steamrolling through Matt's team.
Alright, well, here we go. Big Solgaleo, of course, not taking an Intimidate drop due to its full Metal Body ability. Foul Play comes out first. An unimpressive amount of damage, but of course, remember, if there's not a Steel Spike, that's going to do twice as much damage next turn. But I guess the question is he giving too much momentum to Chaiyawat? The Precipice Blade's once again missing, but it's missing the Porygon 2. The Incineroar is still going to take a huge amount of damage here.
Yeah, getting that off of the Incineroar, definitely important, and we're going to see the Max Quake come out. Either slot would be devastating, but getting rid of that Incineroar immediately, nice for Chaiyawat. You stop that Incineroar, but definitely going to be a challenge to handle this next turn, depending on how much damage the Calyrex Ice can do if it comes in. As you mentioned, that Foul Play didn't do much yet, but it will do a lot soon. And that's a Quake and not a Steel Spike. And so there's no defensive boost on that Solgaleo. Definitely Matt playing into a position where he might really have the offense to just stop the Solgaleo even through Dynamax.
Yeah, that's a really awkward turn now for Chaiyawat. Maybe he was hoping that the Precipice Blades would take the Porygon low enough that Solgaleo could try to pick it up. But now this is really awkward. I feel like Solgaleo has to Max Guard here to maybe reposition for Fake Out, bring the Incineroar back in on the Groudon side. Otherwise, Foul Play plus any damage from the Calyrex should just pick the Solgaleo up very, very easily.
Yeah, definitely a tough position for Chaiyawat. Do you go for that Max Guard? Do you try to pivot things in? And then for Matt's side, do you go for the KO onto the Solgaleo, which is just terrifying to be staring down with that boost? Or do you go for something else because you need to still have momentum, even if that Solgaleo goes for the Max Guard? So Chaiyawat definitely in a tough spot. Can't just go for the blanket attacks with Solgaleo, but there's still a really nuanced turn here with how things go out. And we do see the Max Guard. Did Matt read into it is the question.
Yeah, I think this double target into the Solgaleo is a super safe play, even though it looks like, oh wow, Matt just like wastes his entire turn. Yeah, he kind of does, but at the same time, the Groudon can't really apply that much pressure to these Pokemon. The Porygon 2 is free to just recover if it wants to once the Solgaleo is dealt with. And this kills off another turn of Dynamax, so it's really, really an effective way to sort of cover for the worst case scenario, not opening himself up to Chaiyawat going for a read. And now you just repeat the play, right? And Solgaleo, if it switches out, well, cool, the weakness policy's gone. So you've already gotten a really, really big win here, and Chaiyawat's going to struggle to accomplish anything with just the Groudon applying offensive pressure here.
Yeah, seeing the damage coming out from that Groudon was definitely not impressive. This poor Pokemon, it has so much stats, but it's just taken so many attack drops, and it's pivoting out now. Maybe if Chaiyawat had gotten the read in a different way, would have liked to have that fake out pressure earlier, but coming out now, getting that Incineroar into position to maybe have fake out pressure that next turn. We're going to have to see if the Solgaleo pivoted, if it tried to do a double Max Guard, if it's just willing to accept the risk of potentially being KO'd this turn. We do see that high horsepower coming out. It's a lot of damage into the Solgaleo. If that's a foul play and it does twice as much as before, is that going to KO? It looks like it is. So that's Solgaleo down. Chaiyawat definitely in a tough spot for finishing off this game, losing the restricted with all of its boosts.
Yeah, that's a really, really big problem now. The White Herb, of course, already procced on the Calyrex now, but it's still neutral because of that White Herb. And that's the main way of dealing with the Calyrex Ice that's just gone. So Chaiyawat is in a rough spot here. Venusaur always has, it does have the please bail me out button with that sleep powder, but it's still going to be a really, really tough situation. Trick Room has expired here, but Matt has the opportunity to put it back down with the Porygon 2 here. But fake out sleep powder, if the sleep powder hits, this could still get a little bit dicey.
Fake out coming out into that Porygon 2, going to stop it from sending Trick Room, Sleep Powder into the Calyrex, and it does connect. So it's going to stop Calyrex from moving as well, but Calyrex Ice is burning its first turn of Guaranteed Sleep without taking any damage. It seems like Chaiyawat's also going to need a whole lot more Sleep Powders to be able to pull himself back into this game, or maybe some longer sleeps from that Calyrex Ice. Where there's a Venusaur, there's definitely a way, but I think you have to wonder how Chaiyawat's going to make sure that there's as little strain as possible on the sleep powder getting like constant 3-turn sleeps, because you can't do this indefinitely, and just an Incineroar for offense is going to make things a bit challenging.
Yeah, but Matt's opening himself up to that really hard. If a sleep powder hits the Porygon and then he sleep powders the Palkia again next turn, not taking that first mandatory sleep turn on the Calyrex Ice. I mean, I guess it did take the mandatory sleep turn, but not trying to get the wake up on the Calyrex Ice is an interesting decision here, because you're really like, if you're not taking your sleep turns, you're never gonna wake up, right? So now 2 for 2 on the sleep powders. If it hits the Palkia and good sleep turns come in, Chaiyawat definitely has an out here.
I do think that it's really interesting to consider pivoting in that Palkia, because those Flare Blitzes into Calyrex Ice with bad luck definitely is a route for Chaiyawat. And you do have to make it through so many turns of sleep here, but at least with that Incineroar on the field, maybe you have a chance to wake up. But yeah, we are seeing Matt just has an entire team almost of sleeping Pokemon. Incineroar parting, shutting out into something that can maybe do a little bit more damage. If this Porygon 2 can wake up quickly, if the other Pokemon can wake up quickly, there's definitely some options, but Chaiyawat definitely playing extraordinarily well to this out that he has of Venusaur is faster than everything and has a sleep move. That's my plan for going through this next part of the game. And that Groudon coming in without Intimidate drops, definitely able to put out a lot of offensive pressure.
Yeah, this is also where it gets a little bit awkward, because, like, okay, the Porygon sleeps. I think that's arguably better. I feel like the worst case scenario is the Porygon wakes up, sets Trick Room, and then Palkia just stays asleep for the entire, like, for the full 3 turns. Then you're just wasting your Trick Room turns. So, the other hand, though, we do now have a Sun-boosted Venusaur, which is, you know, it's already faster than everything on the team, so it's not a huge deal. But the Groudon is going to be able to apply more pressure. The Porygon 2 already only at about 60%, still has 1 potential turn of sleep. So if it stays asleep, we might be able to see the KO picked up by Chaiyawat. Helping Hand coming in, big Precipice Blades as long as it hits. Let's see. He's already missed 2 in this set. Can Chaiyawat connect? Yes.
This blade comes out, hits both Pokemon. With that Helping Hand, going to do so much damage, but it's not a KO yet. Porygon 2 has a chance. It could wake up, and then if the Palkia and the Calyrex Ice wake up, they've already taken the mandatory turns of... Well, it doesn't matter. Oh... Wow, so much sleep happening for Matt's side of the field, and if these Precipice Blades keep connecting, Matt's in a really tough spot for being able to finish off this game.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this does go back to the decision to switch out that Calyrex Ice Rider. I don't see the benefit to not taking that sleep turn. The unfortunate situation is Chaiyawat needed a lot of luck to get here, you know? Like, he needed to hit 3 sleep powders, he needed the Porygon 2 to stay asleep, he needed to hit the Precipice Blades. But you're opening yourself up to that eventuality happening. So Chaiyawat here, going to be able to pick up the Weather Ball to KO that Porygon 2. And as long as this Precipice Blades hits the Palkia single target, that's going to go down easily.
I've seen Chaiyawat relying on a lot of inaccurate moves so far. Will this one continue to pay off? And it does. Precipice Blades connects, finishes off that Palkia. And I think we're down to just the Calyrex Ice in the back, trying to face down 3 Pokemon while asleep. I believe it's Dynamax, so that's something, but needing to take, especially with that Weather Ball revealed, with a fire attack on probably every single Pokemon on Chaiyawat's side of the field and Sun Up. This poor Calyrex is probably going to have to be seeding this game, barring a lot of luck.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the play is here. I mean, maybe Trick Room would have even been the play. Try to capitalize on a turn 1 wake up, but instead the Dynamax coming on out, opting to maintain as much HP as possible. I do like the targeting into the Venu, because at least if you wake up, you don't risk going back to sleep. It's not over. I don't think this is over yet. Now, there is no White Herb. Incineroar intimidating this thing is going to actually work, but if it picks up a KO here on the Venusaur, it gets the boost. Then the instant comes in back to neutral, and you can still play it out from there. But Weather Ball going to dish out a pretty sizable amount of damage to start things off.
Well, in Fire Punch, 2 fire attacks right off the bat from a lot of Pokemon that are faster. And Calyrex Sleeps 2, gonna be a tough one for Matt. Just not getting to attack since the moment that Venusaur hit the field.
Yeah, that's the power of Venusaur. The bailout button did come in clutch this time around. Chaiyawat ties up the set 1-1. Funny how both games, game 1, Chaiyawat looked like he had it locked down. He looked like he had it won. And then Tid just came in. Matt just won in the end. Just ended up winning. And then this one as well, it looked like Matt had it locked up, and then all of a sudden Venusaur comes in and says, nah, and then manages to win the game out for Nontaro, for Chaiyawat. So, nice comebacks in both games so far. No idea how this game 3 is going to go. It is a bit of a wonky matchup, but it's been fun to see how these guys are approaching it.
Yeah, I think I really like the point you brought up, that these have really been games that totally flipped in the last few turns. And I think that really speaks well to the preparation that both players have, the experience they have in this format, that it's really never over until the game says it's over. And I think that's going to be a fun thing to watch for in this game 3. We're going to have to be careful not to call a match at all too early, because where there's a Venusaur, there's definitely always an option. There's also a lot of momentum shifts with... Matt has been going for very late game Dynamaxes, and if you can get that Trick Room positioning right, then there's so much that can happen. I think going into this game 3, the big question is if Matt has a plan for the Venusaur other than just assuming that you don't get quite as extraordinarily unlucky, and if Chaiyawat has some plans for how to play that Solgaleo a little bit better, not get it knocked out right away.
Yeah, I do feel like one of the things that I say a lot personally is I feel like there comes a time when you're so far ahead in a game that you need to stop thinking about how to win the game and start thinking about how you could possibly lose the game and play around that as best as possible. And, Chaiyawat did a great job playing to his outs. It's kind of the inverse of playing to your outs, right? Like, if you get super far ahead, your opponent is looking to that tiny likelihood of okay, if this happens in this specific way, I can still win. That's how they're going to play. You have to think about, instead of, if I click this button, I can win the game right now. Instead, you have to think about, how can I prevent myself from losing? And that was really kind of where Matt's game 2 fell apart. With that switch out of the Calyrex Ice Rider, if you're not taking your sleep turns, you're not going to wake up. You just essentially give your opponent more value from the sleep powder if you're continually switching in and out. And we did kind of see it in game 1 as well, where there was a guaranteed win condition for Matt by protecting on the last turn to allow the Hail to pick up the Thunderous KO at the end of game number 1. Instead, he opened himself up to potentially getting owned by Thunderwave full para hacks, which is, again, incredibly low likelihood of happening. But as we just saw, that can end up happening at the end of the day. You really have to make sure you're looking at all of the very niche ways you can lose and playing around them to the best of your ability.
Pokemon really is such a different game when you get to those last few turns and you're trying to figure out how to handle the fact that your opponent is desperately looking for their ways out. There's decades old articles from I think Wolf Glick about the dangers of the upper hand there, and I think it's really interesting to see that that's such a skill that is in such high demand from both sides of the field. How do you close out from a lead? But we're seeing another switch up here, starting with that Suicune from Chaiyawat's side of the field. We're gonna have to see what that can do, and then double Trick Room instead of leading with that Incineroar from Matt's side of the field.
I don't remember what the moveset on this Suicune was in EUIC. It's been a hot minute, but I really like this option because, the options for Matt become significantly limited when the Palkia takes its special attack drops from things like Parting Shot or a potential Snarl from this Suicune. So I really like the way that Chaiyawat has approached that Palkia in this set so far, because he's made it so that he knows the Palkia's not maxing, at least right now, right? Because every time the Palkia sets Trick Room, it gets Parting Shotted. Okay, if he's maxing a -1 Palkia without Life Orb, you don't really care. You're kind of feeling happy about that anyway. And bringing the Suicune to start things off might just be a way to just get things started with the Snarl. You have the option to bulldoze the Solgaleo if you really want to, but there's that Snarl. Palkia, once again, kind of neutralized as an offensive threat.
Palkia taking that special attack drop before attacking every single game. Does go for a Hydro Pump. Is that into the Incineroar switch? And it is. That was good damage to that Solgaleo, and it's great damage to that Incineroar, even with the Snarl. And Porygon 2 this time taking the burden of setting that Trick Room. This Incineroar now has a chance to Parting Shot this Palkia. Palkia is going to be going to very low special attack shortly, quite possibly. But getting that Hydro Pump off, getting damage into one of the main pivots from Chaiyawat's side of the field, seems really instrumental for being able to leverage these Trick Room turns well.
Yeah, I really like the way that Matt approached that, and I do like the way he's playing the Palkia, right? Because he's identified that Chaiyawat is trying to neutralize his Palkia. Chaiyawat doesn't want to have to deal with a Dynamax Palkia at full power. But the Palkia isn't taking that much damage itself. Like, there's nothing that just deletes the Palkia, so he's using it for the Trick Room, and just for chip damage, for really effective chip damage, which is really, really nice when you have something like a Calyrex that might be able to benefit from that with its Chilling Neigh ability.
Yeah, absolutely. We see Matt taking a long time to try to figure things out, but you really identified that this Palkia has so much that it can do here. It's tough to figure out how to get the most use out of it, but it's really just not threatened. And we're seeing a foul play coming out, just doing a little bit of damage into that Incineroar. Incineroar going for that parting shot, lowering the special attack stat a little bit more of this Palkia. Palkia did choose to stay in. We saw Matt was thinking about maybe switching it out. Maybe there were some other options, but instead just staying in to go for some damage. A -2 Palkia that attacks a lot is still doing a decent amount of damage. It is still a restricted slot. And so we're going to have to see what's coming in here, what feels comfortable potentially taking an attack from this Palkia.
Well, the Groudon pops on in. Another nice way to neutralize potential damage there from that Palkia. And this is already going pretty well for Chaiyawat, I'd say. Hydro Pump's going to come in once again. That's going to be another super effective hit. This one shouldn't do too much damage, though. Ooh, that actually does quite a lot of damage. It's a critical hit getting through that special attack drop. That is a little bit unfortunate. I was going to say that Chaiyawat's doing a really good job of stalling out these Trick Rooms by just not allowing Matt to get into a super offensive position. But another big chunk of damage thanks to that critical hit on that Hydro Pump.
It's one of the really big advantages of being on the offensive in Pokemon and going for that Trick Room, even when there isn't a clear way to take KOs. Just if you're attacking every turn, if you've got some decent offensive pressure, the ways that luck play out, you've got some pretty good odds for them to play out in your favor. This Palkia has been trying to attack almost every single turn through an attack drop, and it finally gets one of those critical hits we were mentioning earlier, and that's really nice damage into that Groudon. Not as devastating as it could have been into another Pokemon, but getting that damage, being able to get this Groudon down to only about 30% after that foul play, and then leaving that Palkia in, expecting that switch with the Fire Punch. Palkia just stays in, goes for a Spatial Run, can it get another crit on this Groudon? Even if not, it's still doing a little bit of damage, and putting that Groudon maybe even within foul play range, as this Palkia just stays in on 2 4-times resisted attacks. Chaiyawat really trying to read in on that switch, and Matt really reading in on that and saying, I know Palkia's not doing much, but I really need to leave it in here.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this a little bit in game number 1. I wondered how much Chaiyawat was thrown off by the fact that Matt was willing to say, oh, okay, you're dropping my special attack, boosting your special defense. In this case, he's down to -2 now, and just keep clicking. Like, you start to think to yourself at some point, okay, surely now he has to switch out. He's at -2 now. And he's like, no, I don't care. I'm just going to keep clicking buttons. And I don't really mind. Like, at this point as well, the Trick Room has kind of run its course. Like, he still has Trick Room up, but he's not going to be able to Dynamax his Calyrex Ice if he switches it in and take full advantage of Trick Room. So at this point, there's a nice crit, though. But at this point, he's kind of just thinking, okay, you know what? I'm going to probably need a second Trick Room if I want to get the full value out of my Calyrex Ice Dynamax. That Hydro Pump's not going to land a crit, though. And, well... Gold coming into the Porygon 2 here. Are we going to see a burn? That would be a pretty nice turn of events with the foul play, but not going to happen this time around.
Yeah, so Groudon being able to get off that Precipice Blades, especially with the critical hit that you shouted out, such a big deal. This Porygon 2 we're seeing is now a little bit on the defensive here. Instead of putting out that foul play pressure, has to consider that recover button. I think that's really the flip side of, we saw Palkia not switching out, and that was a really good call from Matt that one turn, but the next turn, Chaiyawat really took advantage of that, of saying, if you're really just leaving your Palkia out there and not doing anything during Trick Room, I'll just start clicking Precipice Blades, and it'll do a lot of damage to you. And now really forcing this switch, where this Incineroar has to come in so that there's at least some form of offensive pressure. And it's going to be an opportunity for Chaiyawat to maybe find a way to have a lot of offense here. As we see the Solgaleo come in, is the weakness policy being procced this turn? Even if not, there's a lot of pressure going forwards. Porygon 2 goes for recover. There's fake out pressure from the Incineroar, but how is this Groudon going to set up its teammates? Is it going to do a lot of damage? Is it going to activate that weakness policy? Precipice Blade's coming out into 2 Pokemon where it is very happy doing that damage, getting a ton of damage into that Incineroar, and Trick Room fades. Porygon 2 is in position to maybe just reset it again, and you can stop the Groudon from activating that weakness policy now.
Yeah, for a second, I believed. Yeah. When you mentioned the potential Bulldoze there, Bulldoze from Chaiyawat there would have been an amazing play. Trick Room ends, Solgaleo is the fastest thing on the field, and then it just nukes the Porygon 2. Because at that point, you get the Bulldoze damage in, you're probably sitting at like 120, plus 2 Solgaleo should be able to pick that up, at least with the assistance of the Groudon. But now, Matt went for the other very smart play where you just switch out the Palkia, get rid of the drops, bring in the Incineroar, and now you have fake out pressure with the Trick Room once again. And the way that Matt's been playing this out, I talked about it, we both talked about it a little bit in game number 1, or game number 2, where we talked about how he really needed to play around second Trick Rooms and how hard that can be, because it's very easy to just send out your lead and click fake out Trick Room. But positioning well for a second Trick Room can be very, very difficult, and Matt's been doing it phenomenally. You can see in the way he's played every game, his game plan is to set that second Trick Room from the get-go, and he's been positioning himself for it fantastically. This time around, though, just gonna recover.
It's happening! Oh, there was this great mind game here. We're gonna see what the Solgaleo goes for in a moment. Matt didn't even need to set Trick Room. Oh, that's so cool, because there's this mind game. The Chaiyawat always had the option to reverse the Trick Room with the Porygon 2 set it, but Matt called it, got the read right, and suddenly is in just such a great position here for it. Wow.
Oh, no. Big got him energy right there. Chaiyawat gonna be feeling very sad. A devastating moment when that happens. You know, the extra HP from recover is nice, but the real damage is the mental damage that your opponent takes from a moment like that.
Yeah, being able to get reads like that, definitely really strong. At the same time, Chaiyawat does have the option to just reverse this Trick Room again. There's still not infinite pressure on the Solgaleo, because you have the fake out to sort of maybe try to hit that Flare Blitz. I'm sure that if you're Chaiyawat, you were aware that this was a potential risk. You definitely wouldn't have clicked the Trick Room if you thought that was what Matt was going to go for. But there's definitely still ways out. It's just, yeah, it's tough to recover from the mental damage of having a turn like that. We are going to see the Porygon 2 being hit by fake out. Parting shot coming out. There's a big question here. Does the Solgaleo reverse the Trick Room now, or does it go for an attack here? Either it definitely has an opportunity to do. Reversing that Trick Room might actually be really, really strong here.
I feel like it probably reverses the Trick Room since it's not Dynamaxing. The problem is you got a full HP Porygon 2. I feel like even if you do reverse the Trick Room, Matt just clicks Trick Room again. Like, we're now in the mode of like the battle for whether or not Trick Room will exist, as opposed to trying to stall out Trick Room and trying to take advantage of Trick Room. There's the reverse. Once again, Trick Room going to be used. Feel like we're going to see it 3 turns in a row, though, Hayden.
There are so many restricteds in this game. No Trick Room. And then there's also the Porygon 2. I don't know how to handle this much Trick Room. Solgaleo definitely has an opportunity to start doing a little bit of damage. That's really going to be the key, is trying to find a way to still weave in attacks at the right time through this constantly inverting speed order. But definitely tough. The Solgaleo did reverse the Trick Room, but it's not in a position where weakness policy is safe to activate. And so these two really bulky Pokemon, the Porygon 2 and the Palkia, going to be able to pretty safely restore the speed order and maybe continue getting some damage off. Because Palkia, finally, Palkia did it. It got an attack off without reduced special attack. And it gets a critical hit too. Wow. So much damage in that Suicune. Solgaleo this time does call, I think, the Trick Room. It went for it before the Porygon 2. And so, second time's the charm. The Trick Room is reversed at the right time. And that's continuing to stall turns from Matt. But I think with that Palkia continuing to throw out damage, Chaiyawat to find the right way in. Go ahead.
Yeah, like, I feel like that's super safe for Matt to just click Trick Room there. Even if you know Chaiyawat might call it, if he calls it, that's still a good turn for you, because you're in the exact same position for all 3 Pokemon, except the Suicune took damage. So you're just getting a free hit with your Palkia onto whatever on the other side there. So super, super safe. It's a nice call for Chaiyawat. It looks cool, but that's still overall a very good turn for Matt.
Yeah, Chaiyawat just trying to find the right way to position and needing to make a few reads to try to get the speed order right. But it's really going to come down to things like this. I think Chaiyawat's making the call now to go offensive. Solgaleo's Dynamaxing, not going to be reversing Trick Room at all anymore. Is it going to be able to get that damage out, get the defensive boost from those Quakes? And is Suicune going to be the right supporting Pokemon to be able to help it to do this? That's the big question.
All right, Suicune is faster than the Palkia. That's a big thing to note here, as the weakness policy gets procced. How much damage is Big Solgi gonna do? I don't think it can pick up Porygon 2. That's the thing. Porygon 2 is so bulky, and you have to be ready for moves like this. That maybe they're not the most common thing in the world, but Steel Spike into the Palkia goes in. All right, you remove one of the Restrictos, but now all of a sudden you're just gonna have another Trick Room activated, and then you may have the defense boost, but you're also +2. Foul Play is still gonna do big damage to that Solgaleo.
I do really like the adjustment to go for Steel Spike instead of Quake this time, seeing that before Matt's out against the Solgaleo was being able to go for round-up type attacks plus that Foul Play. I think the Solgaleo sitting here with so much hit points, that really was a brilliantly timed Dynamax. I wasn't quite aware of the Bulldoze option from the Suicune, and I think being able to get that off and activate that weakness policy at just the right time, in just the right positioning. We saw Trick Room set in reverse 3 different times, and finally we're in this position where Solgaleo has the boost that it needs to be really threatening, even with Trick Room up. And we're seeing Matt really taking some time to think about, how am I going to weather this Solgaleo down fast enough? Because I don't have the option I had last game of just foul play high horsepower and pick up the KO.
An interesting decision to go for the Incineroar. Now, Max Guard is, of course, an option for the Solgaleo, but it's a similar situation to the last game, right? Where it's like, okay, you can foul play into the Max Guard, but like if you do that, you're fine. You still take out a turn of Dynamax. But the Incineroar here, the double up into the Solgaleo, I don't think it's going to KO with that defense boost. So I'm not sure about this one. I feel like if maybe Max Quake might have been able to pick up a Suicune KO, with a max from the Calyrex, but I understand Matt not wanting to go for that risk either, because it's very, very scary to attack into that and then risk losing your Dynamax to a weakness policy boosted Solgaleo.
We do see Foul Play and Flare Blitz coming out, bringing that Solgaleo pretty low. It's now in range of some attacks from maybe that Calyrex, but it's setting a second Steel Spike, getting more defensive boosts, taking that Porygon 2 down to the red. This Suicune's going to have an opportunity with Scald to maybe pick up a KO on either Pokemon, and these defense boosts are starting to stack up. This Solgaleo is definitely in position to do a lot of damage. Incineroar being finished off by that Suicune, and now there's a lot resting on this Calyrex Ice. You got the targeting last turn. Are you going to be able to finish it off with this Calyrex, or are the defensive boosts on Solgaleo going to be able to help it edge its way out, or even just going for a Max Guard if there's a double target into that slot?
I feel like you're pretty safe to foul play Max Quake the Suicune here. Maybe even just high horsepower if you don't want to burn a turn of Dynamax. But one thing that is, of course, a risk is that you do... If your Calyrex doesn't KO the Suicune, you risk the Porygon 2 going down. So a lot rests on the damage calculation there, and I don't know whether or not Calyrex will be able to pick up that Suicune from half HP. We'll have to see what exactly Matt goes for. It's a big read-heavy turn here. We'll see, because if the Solgaleo Max Guards, you want to click Recover. So if Solgaleo attacks you, your Recover's not going to save you. You're still going to go down.
Yeah, we're seeing Matt really struggling to figure out what to do this turn. There's such a tough situation with how to handle... I'm getting so nervous watching Matt click these buttons. There's so many different choices that he has to make here, and it really is just some really nuanced calls. We're seeing a Max Guard, actually, from the Calyrex. Maybe trying to read into what the Solgaleo chooses to target, maybe get some damage off with that foul play. We're going to have to see how that turns out. There's so many options from Chaiyawat that it's really hard to say how this turn will play out a priori.
I'm not sure how I feel about the Max Guard. We'll have to see exactly how this goes. I'm a little bit curious what the Scald damage onto like a Max Quaked Porygon 2 would have been, because, you know, Eviolite, Max Quake, Suicune's not that strong. Foul Play, though, goes in. Solgaleo does not go down. Steel Spike, though, into the Calyrex. Turns out that Matt is a much smarter player than I am in this case, picking up a pretty solid turn there, getting big damage onto that Solgaleo while still maintaining his own Dynamax. That is, turns out to be absolutely the play. And we'll see how Matt's able to navigate this from here. We do not have any more Dynamax turns for that Solgaleo, and now it's all going to be down to how well this Calyrex can move through here.
Yeah, a lot is resting on this Calyrex's shoulders. It has to carry the entire rest of the game here. It does survive that turn. You might have liked to see if you could read into that Solgaleo's targeting. Maybe if you could just have finished off that Solgaleo, but that's such a tall order with the fact that you could also have totally seen that Solgaleo going for the Max Guard. We're going to have to see. Calyrex is a Pokemon known for being able to steamroll in endgames. It does still have some Trick Room that it can leverage, but going down to just one Pokemon and not getting that Recover off with Porygon 2, definitely really tough. And you could see Matt really thinking down to the wire. This was such a complicated endgame. We're going to have to see what happens here if this Calyrex does have the way out, or if Chaiyawat's preserved enough resources that it's going to be feasible to get rid of this Calyrex.
Well, Groudon's going to be coming on in here. That's going to go down. See, this is what does kind of speak to Matt's advantage. A lot of these Pokemon are very low, so Chilling Neigh boosts could definitely steamroll here. It's going to be a double switch here, so the Incineroar is going to come on in. That's going to proc the White Herb, but it's still going to end up being a +1 Calyrex Ice Rider at the end of this turn. We'll see. I don't know. Like, does Chaiyawat need a Scald Burn here? I don't know. Everything is so close to Fainted.
Yeah, this is such an interesting... I mean, we said that there's these really can seesaw, and Matt still definitely has a way back in. Max Quake just finishing up the Groudon. Probably you would have wanted to get rid of that Incineroar, but that would have been a tough call when the Solgaleo was staring you down in that slot. Incineroar out there, but not able to do Fake Out this turn because Calyrex still has another turn of Dynamax. And it does, as you mentioned, have that +1 attack boost now. So if it's able to time things right, get KOs every turn, and survive things at the right time, maybe there is a way out for Matt. It's definitely tough, as you mentioned, with all of those Pokemon being really low HP.
All right, well, let's see what comes back in here. I feel like it has to be a fish for the Scald Burn, right? Like the Suicune. At this point, we have +1. Either Mon is going to go down. There's one more turn of Trick Room. Neither of these probably has Protect as well. That's the other awkward thing. And Protect wouldn't have even helped on the Solgaleo, although that doesn't have Protect either. There's no Protects left for Chaiyawat. Oh, this is going to be rough. I mean, no Steel Spike on the Calyrex means that we could still see Sunsteel Strike go burr into this team. 3 minutes left in the battle. I don't think we're going to end up going to timer, though. Oh, this is a very awkward endgame for the 3rd time in a row. These games have been crazy, Hayden.
Yeah, I think it really, really, really speaks to how much these players have prepared and how much they care about what happens. We see the Hailstorm coming out, interestingly, into that Incineroar. Should be enough to pick up that KO. That residual damage might be really nice for maybe trying to edge that Suicune into KO range from a Glacial Lance. It might give an option, too, to finish off the Solgaleo with that Hail Chip. So a really interesting adjustment there, choosing to prioritize the Hail damage over the special defense boost. Getting another attack boost. As you mentioned, there's a lot that rides on whether this Scald gets a burn or not. That's a really important question. It does not get that burn. And so now the question is just, this Calyrex has played it down to a 2v1. Trick Room is up. What can Chaiyawat do? There's another chance to maybe get a Scald burn. How low is the Solgaleo relative to the Hail Chip? Is this Calyrex going to be able to just get a Glacial Lance off and finish this off? Or look, what exactly will happen here? And there's only, wow, this game is running so close. So often when we see 2 minutes left show up on the game timer, it's because the game has been really slow, and that's not the case here. Things are still right up at the edge, and there's so many questions I have about how this endgame finishes playing off.
Yeah, Trick Room expiring at just the right time for Chaiyawat. This Protect is going to help Solgaleo take some chip damage from that Hail. Matt is open to a potential loss condition of a critical Sunsteel Strike for sure, but what is the best way through here? There's no time to set Trick Room and go for Glacial Lance, but if you click Glacial Lance, if the Scald burns you, I think the Suicune lives? I don't know. This is going to be a weird endgame. Looks like Chaiyawat opting to also go the timer route. You know, of course, if the game were to end with 2v1, Chaiyawat would win, but we know that there is no Protect on this Solgaleo. There's probably no Protect on the Suicune either. Scald goes in. Sunsteel Strike also going to go in. Oh, how much time is going to be left? There's still a lot of animations to come. Buffeting from the Hail coming on in. 2 Pokemon need to take this. Is there, like, leftovers or something to proc? No, there's not! Matt has time for one more turn. Oh, man. That's... oh, man. That's so close.
We were like a single second off from Chaiyawat being able to win that off of timer, just with the way that moves were entered. That is... I've never seen anything so close in my life. Wow, and then there's still the question of how will this turn play out. If that Suicune gets a Scald Burn, if the Sunsteel Strike crits, there's definitely a few outs for Chaiyawat. But if this Calyrex is able to survive, get off that Glacial Lance. Even if the Suicune survives, it should be lower than the Calyrex, I think, and so that would sort of wrap things up. It's just sort of the question of... we've seen before that the move timer opened up before we were down to the last 45 seconds of the battle, so we do see this last turn playing out. Wow.
All right, 1 in 24 here. Burn comes in, that's something. It's not enough, though. The Sunsteel Strike must critically hit here. Let's see! If it crits, Chaiyawat wins. If it doesn't, he loses. Big damage comes out. Okay, maybe the Scald Burn's actually enough. If the Suicune can live this, burn damage on timer... Suicune takes the hit. It's going to take Hail Chip, but the burn damage will offset that. I have no idea who's going to win this game, Hayden.
It might come down to, I think Matt might have Pokemon with more HP other than the Calyrex. I really don't know. That Suicune's really low, but so is the Calyrex.
I think it's Calyrex. I think Calyrex has it.
I don't know, though, because there's still the question of, like, what's the sum total of the HP on each side of the field? The tiebreakers here are insane. Okay, Matt wins.
Yeah. Oh man,
Wow.
the Calyrex just has enough base HP. The Suicune also has a very good base HP, but I think at that point you're looking at something like 9 or 10% to 5%. So it's a pretty sizable advantage when you think of it from that perspective. But oh my god. Two incredible comebacks in game 1 and in game 2, bringing us to 1-1, and then one of the closest, if not the closest game 3 I have ever seen in my life. Wow, what a set!
I've been playing Pokemon for 12 years now, and I've never seen a game be that close ever. I am shaking in my seat. I think like the fact too that Protect really mattered from the Calyrex to get that one more turn of Hail Chip before things happened. Like you really needed that to come in,
Yep. Just like an absolutely critical moment
incredibly
there.
interesting. And we're now back up. We're now back up to 2-2. There's so many more games left to be played, and both players are really just giving it everything that they possibly have with their knowledge of Pokemon. I am just shaken.
Yeah. Oh man, how lucky are we that we got that as our first set for the day? Woo! Man, oh, we're gonna need to take a quick little break after that, guys. I'm sure you all need a break as well to just appreciate what we just saw. But when we come back, Jean-Marc Hebert against Akarapon. That's going to be an interesting match as well. Jean-Marc, one of the managers of Team Canada, putting himself in the ring. He is a player who has had a fair amount of success in this format, a top 4 at the Vancouver Regional against Akarapon, who has been really solid this World Cup, or has been part of this team that has been moving forward in this tournament through to the finals. Both players having the faith of their team in a very, very important set to decide which team is going to be on match point going into the final 2 matches of the day.
Yeah, if these past 4 matches are any judge, you do not want to miss these next 3 matches. This could really come right down to the wire. You definitely want to catch Jean-Marc and Akarapon. Please come back right after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back with some more amazing Pokemon for you all. Thank you.